You hear about him in the scriptures rarely, rarely. I mean, he got about 3 verses in Genesis when he encountered Abraham. And then he's in Psalm 110 with 1 line. It was talking about David, who was kind of being seen as a priest. Wasn't a priest. He wasn't from that community. He was not a Levite. But he built the temple, and so he was going to be sort of the priest there, but a different kind of priest, not a Levite priest. And so, that phrase in Psalm 110 is about, he's a priest according to the order of Melchizedek, who himself was a king, and then it shows up in Hebrews, the letter to the Hebrews, somewhat extensively, not just references that keep pointing in there. So who was he? Kind of a mystical figure, priest forever kind of thing. He showed up when Abraham was kind of completing his military adventure to save his nephew and to give away the booty that was gathered. And all of a sudden, as king of Salem, Jerusalem, it was just a little place, know very little about it, but he comes out to greet Abraham. And so you have that very, very brief sort of thing where he talks about himself as king of Salem and priest, the Most High God. And, what I picked up from that was Abraham was on this kind of mystical call to leave his home and to take a journey to wherever God is going to take him. And he didn't have much sense of doing that. So he was moved by a divine inspiration, but he didn't have much sense of who was doing the calling. And Melchizedek, and my understanding of it, he gave him the words, God, the Most High, and then he added on to that he helped Abraham understand, which led to his victory. And then they shared bread and wine, and Melchizedek brought it out, and they had the exchange, and he disappeared. That was it. But I think every Catholic priest, certainly in my time, and I don't know how far it goes back, but were ordained according to the order of Melchizedek. And so I thought, well, and Jesus in Hebrews is presented as a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. So I thought, well, what's the meaning of that? Is it just a nice little sentence or two that is sort of a mystical thing? And so I felt that Jesus was not a priest. He was not a Levite. That was not part of who he was, but he came for a purpose. And so those 3 very rare references to Melchizedek, it seemed to me that there was some way to get meaning out of that. In what sense was Jesus a priest? And I think then it kind of came together for me with, the direction of priesthood in Vatican II, which I think, we've had to grow into a different understanding of what we're about. And I think it was the Tridentine priesthood up to Vatican II, and the documents of Vatican II had a different sense of what priests were to do and to be. And so there were 2, I think, maybe 2 documents dealing with priesthood of the 16 documents of Vatican II. And so I had to mine those and try to understand what was happening there. And I think there was a lot of newness that I was ordained in 67, came back to the US in 68. And I think, being a priest following Vatican II was very different. I actually did a series of 4 webinars with 8 different priests, 2 priests for each of them, out of the Diocese of Louisville, Kentucky. And they had put together a little booklet about their own experience. And these were guys that were ordained. One or another was in the 60s, but most of them were in the early 70s. And then, you know, they had the rush of Vatican II and the newness of priesthood. And to some extent, I experienced that, but not in the same sense they did, where so many of the guys were put into parishes when they were first assigned to older priests that were very much in the old school. And so there was just kind of this struggle between them. So they talked about the challenge they faced of being the kind of priest that Vatican II was called to be. And then through the years, there was a change again, little by little, during the time of John Paul II and Benedict, where I think there was a bit of you know, the enthusiasm, the excitement, the adventure of being a priest after Vatican II. During the 70s especially, it was sort of like it was all clamped down. To some extent, it went back to almost a traditional approach. And of course, when Benedict reauthorized, you know, the Latin Mass, the Tridentine Mass, I think that just added to it, that the excitement and adventure of the priests of my age, you know, they were very disappointed, discouraged, I think, and happily Francis has come along. And I think that my book was written then, really I put it together with Francis, and Francis kind of renewing the adventure of priesthood as I understood it in Vatican II.